You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact, because we don't have anywhere else to go. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we have been watching Final Mission. It was written by Casey Arnold Ince and Jerry Taylor and directed by Corey Allen. It first aired the week of November 19th, 1990. James, what's this one all about?
Wesley Crusher has been accepted into Starfleet Academy. Before he does, Picard decides to take Wesley on a mission where he is mediating a mining dispute. For some reason, they head out on some wreck of a mining ship with a shifty captain. The ship then crashes on a desert planet right on cue while the Enterprise answers a distress call because a garbage ship is poisoning a planet with radiation. While Picard, Wesley and Captain Grumpy survive the crash, they must travel a long journey to some caves where there's some water protected by some weird force field. Picard gets injured when they try to access the water, but can Wesley save him? And can the Enterprise save the planet without getting everyone horribly irradiated? And why didn't Picard pack any sandwiches?
Good questions all. Alex, you had never seen this episode before. What did you think of it?
It's the first time in a while that I've been willing it to end.
The show?
Just life.
Okay.
I'm exaggerating. It's not that bad, but you know what? I felt like we've done this before. We've just rotated the characters round, and
yeah,
I just don't care.
It's very much a sister episode to Samaritan Snare, where Wesley and Picard are stuck together on that ship. And actually, I feel like I would have preferred to see something a little more stripped back and a little simpler than that. Just the two of them having a conversation, maybe a shuttle that has stopped working. I don't think you need a lot of the drama in this episode, because what you want is a two-hander and these two characters to express their feelings for each other, their development, and what's going on. And you kind of get that in the best moments of this episode, but I feel there's a lot of contrived setup to get to where you actually want to be.
I think it needs to be a bit more complex than just a two-hander, though. I don't think that the audience would accept a two-hander, really, certainly at this point, particularly as a big final episode for Wesley. I think you need that problem for him to solve. Even though we know, obviously, it's Wesley, he always solves everything because he's a genius, but I think putting him into a situation where Picard couldn't solve it, Picard is now incapacitated, and he has to solve it. I think the episode is a great way to send the character off.
I'm not against having a two-hander between the characters. I think that's a perfectly legitimate way to go. I kind of feel that it almost doesn't have the confidence to carry out what it starts out with. So what should almost be like Red Dwarf doing Marooned turns into, oh, and they're stranded and they're going to have to talk about things that they wouldn't normally admit to. But we'll introduce this other element, and we're going to have this water, and we're going to have Captain Cockblock, who's coming along for the ride as well, and he's got a booze problem, and there's a shield around the water. Oh my god, and Captain Picard is crushed under some rocks. He's crushed under some rocks, and this is very familiar to what happened to previously with just Beverly in place of Wesley. And it's over.
Fine, Picard and Wesley are going on a mission. Why exactly are they using this garbage ship as a transport? It seems very un-Federation. It seems very un-Starfleet. There's lots of shuttles sitting there. We know that they can go at warp when they want them to. It seems like a very weird setup, them getting on this shuttle, which, can I say, Geordi checked before they set off. he did not do a good check, did he? I mean, what kind of chief engineer is he? Yeah, all looks good, Captain. Explodes. He should be getting a reprimand for that.
Well, I mean, last week you had him, he couldn't fix the computer. And okay, that was in a fictitious future, but it still applies. And this week, well, it's just shoddy workmanship. Bring back Argyle is what I say.
He would never have let that happen.
Yeah, fictitious future, fictitious girlfriend, so, you know, fits the MO.
Does that seem natural to you guys, Wesley and Picard? The captain of the flagship of the Federation getting on a garbage ship, like a little nasty mining ship. It just seems like a really weird thing to happen.
Well, it's set up at the end, isn't it? Just, Wesley, I did this because I wanted some time for you and me alone with this stranger. Yeah, it's very contrived.
And also, you'd sort of accept that if, the Enterprise is on this mission, but it's only after they set off that they get the distress call. It's like, we've got to go. It's like, what were they doing? Were they just, like, hanging around? I don't really understand the setup. It could have been, the Enterprise is needed here. We need to get here. This is the only transport. But it seems very dramatically in air. I'm not really sure why any of this takes place except to get character A to point B, and it just all sort of... It seems like it's just set up to get people places, and it doesn't really make sense if you actually stop and think about it.
They could have explained it with one line. They could have just said, had Picard tell Wesley, it'll look better from a diplomatic point of view if we arrive in one of their ships. That would have solved it.
And I'm all for hand-waving with one line. You know, that's why ships aren't detected. That's why they're the only ship in the sector. All of those times. Like, I'm fine with that, but I do like it to be there, because I know it could be explained away with one line. I know, we transported through the shields because of this. It was on a rotating frequency and all that stuff. But I need it to be there for stuff to make sense. Otherwise, I get annoyed and have to make a podcast about it. Anyway. Yeah, but like, I guess that's not important. I guess the important thing is they crash on a planet. How do they respond?
Well, by Picard staying calm and resolute and Wesley being really bloody annoying. If this is supposed to be sending off this character, it's not doing a lot to re-endear me to the character. And I realise that they then try and offset that at the end with, but Wesley saves the day. But I'm kind of past the point of caring.
I mean, he always saves the day anyway.
I'll just let him die.
I think that the whole plot is just a bit odd. So they're on a shuttle, it's a weird shuttle, then it explodes, and then they land on a planet, then they have to march across the desert, and that's not actually a big part, and then they arrive at the caves, and then there's a weird sentry guarding a source of water, and you're just like, what is this?
Yeah.
And, you know, if you shoot at it eats your phaser and puts it and covers it in cling film, as far as I can tell. And if you shoot it, it'll cover you in cling film or some kind of plastic. But Wesley solves this problem by typing on his tricorder. It feels like the problem is not something I can understand, because it's something about frequencies, and he's doing something that I don't know what he's doing and isn't conveyed to me visually or verbally, really, and it's just like, well done, he sorted that then. What?
Well, the unfortunate thing is that is true to Wesley's character.
Yeah, I guess it is. And I think the thing is, he's not been used this series, and I know there were issues, I guess, between him and the producers at this point in the show, between the actor and producers, but it just seems like the show's outgrown the character and they don't have anything for him to do anymore. So he's basically not really been present for most of this season. He had a big part to play in Remember Me, but otherwise he's missed episodes and you've really not noticed. He's basically a bridge extra to say, thrusters on full, Captain. So it does kind of make sense for both the character and the actor to leave at this point anyway.
Yeah, I mean, and in some respects, I think you could perhaps have done more by taking all of that element you were talking about before, with going into the caves, having the shielded water, all that old toot, and just have them outside in the sun becoming delirious. You can have them go in search of something, but actually it felt like there was more dramatic weight there than, and now they've taken shelter in the cave and we've got to find some new conceit, so here's the shielded water and Picard's buried, because that just felt like, oh Christ, we're doing this again. And actually, you could have played out exactly the same emotional beats outside, and it would have felt different if you did it from the heat and becoming delirious from lack of water, and yes, it might have become quite similar to the end of the second In-Betweeners movie, and I'm not suggesting that the episode would benefit from Wesley and Picard drinking each other's piss, but who knows.
Okay. I mean, I don't dislike Wesley as a character. I think the writing is a lot to blame, and if you just, I wonder if the actor had decided to stay, how this character arc would have played out. Because I'm not really sure what you do with him. Do you just literally have him? Well, he's an ensign now. He's been given a field promotion. He's been given a field commission. We'll never mention Starfleet Academy, and he'll just be there on the ship. Is that satisfying to play out? Is his ultimate destination? Does he have to go to Starfleet Academy? Or, I don't know. They had a similar situation in Deep Space Nine, where they had a character that went to the Academy and then was back very soon on placement, and then war broke out and he could get a field commission. And that's a way to play it, but it feels like if you put him in a Starfleet uniform, he almost doesn't need to go to the Academy anymore, or he definitely does need to go to the Academy at some point, but he wasn't really doing anything. His arc had essentially played out the moment he put on the uniform.
No, you're right. At this point, it feels like he's on an apprenticeship, not a, like someone doing monitoring in a school to become a teacher. It feels weird for us to be going back to this again. I mean, I don't know necessarily how else you write the character out and leave it open-ended, but I do agree it feels that we've moved on from this, and to go back again to this is kind of bringing up the memories of previous seasons when it feels like we developed past that.
I think that's the point. The show had moved on from the character, and I think even if Will Wheaton had have wanted to stay on, I think the producers would have just said, we don't want him anymore. The writers can't write for him anymore. We don't need Wesley.
And I think there have been cases in other shows, other Star Trek shows certainly, where they've got characters they don't really know what to do with, and they've just sort of limped on for 7 seasons. It doesn't really do the show any favours to have extraneous characters. And I think, as soon as they got rid of Tasha Yar, Worf stepped in as a much better character, more interesting character, and it gave him space to be there. And so I don't think there's any point in having actors around who you just can't use. It's not fair on anyone.
Hey, you wouldn't see them do it today in Star Trek. I mean, you wouldn't literally see them bring a character back from the dead, only then to not really have anything for them to do for 4 episodes.
Or you wouldn't have like all these background extras and then actually have an episode about one of them and realise, we've got no setup for this whatsoever, despite them being there every week, that, we have to then make up friendships and stuff for them to have with our regulars, which you could have shown just in one episode, even once, in the run-up to it, in order to sort of fake some kind of emotional response from the audience. You wouldn't have that, would you?
You're unhappy, aren't you?
I like Star Trek. I really do. But yeah, like that is what it is, and I guess the ending is satisfactory. It's I'm proud of you, son. It's kind of the whole ending to that plot, isn't it? It's just like, well done.
Yeah, you know what? I love that. It was soppy, but it was... No, I adored that. I think that was exactly what they needed to do to send the character off. Give them that moment between Picard and Wesley. That soppy moment. It's cliched, but that's what was needed.
I do think that it would suffer, though, were it not for the fact that one side of that two-hander is Patrick Stewart, because his acting is really selling that in a way that I think perhaps some of the rest of the cast wouldn't.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's true. When you have a great actor, it does elevate everything, and he is operating on a different level from the rest of the cast, much like I would say Anson Mount is in Star Trek Discovery. And I think that it can do one of two things. It can either make the other actors raise their game, or it can make them look bad. And I think in most situations, as a very generous actor, he sells the scene and he makes the rest of them look good. And I think actually the Wesley Picard relationship is quite interesting and is quite nice. It's obviously been underused in the last year or so, but I think here that is a very good scene, and that's very good. I love the stuff about go to Starfleet Academy and talk to Boothby, and that's setting up something else. It's that thing where you say, oh, Star Trek, it's not serialized, but there's little touches that are set up there and then paid off years down the line even, and I really like that. It has depth. It has writers who are remembering what they're writing and what they're saying and who these characters really are, and that means something.
There's the modern idea of serialization, which is that episode ended with this, so we need to start this episode with this, but not consider the previous 40 minutes from that last scene of the previous episode.
Yeah.
That's modern serialization, whereas we have Star Trek doing episodic television where it remembers the past. We had Future Imperfect last week, which had a Horgon in it. It referenced a hologram from a Season 1 episode, a not very well remembered Season 1 episode. It brought back a random Romulan character who was only seen on the view screen previously.
There's attention to detail, and I care about it. So let's talk about the B-plot.
It's a smegging garbage pod.
Yeah. I love the model work in this.
Yeah, I was going to say the same.
I was just watching that and going, oh, that's nice, isn't it? Oh, look at the way the light's hitting off that. I love a nice model.
There are some very Red Dwarf reminiscent shots of those models.
Oh, absolutely. The sort of the over the top pan, the motion control pass by is incredibly Red Dwarfy. It's interesting. I think this we spoke about this in Future Imperfect, how they don't often do unrelated B plots, and this is the most unrelated B plot. I mean, it's not comedy and it's not small, but it's very I don't care, isn't it? It's like there's a planet of weirdos and they're being irradiated by a garbage ship, and we've got to work out a way of getting the ship through the asteroid belt and into the sun, like some kind of video game. It's just like, let's steer the ship. And the way is either they try to fit thrusters to it, but then it's like, oh, that didn't work, so we'll have to drag it, but we're all going to die if we drag it. There's very little peril, because I don't care about the planet, and, I know that the radiation's not going to kill the entire Enterprise crew. It's a delaying tactic. It's a sort of ticking clock device, but it's very nothing.
Surely the B-plot that would make more sense is to go in one of two ways. Either you have the courage of your convictions and don't have a B-plot and just do the two-hander that it kind of feels that naturally is, or the B-plot is them trying to reach them, to rescue them, but being delayed, which I guess this is, but it's them being delayed by something so utterly inconsequential to the main plot.
Yeah, okay, here's me doing that thing where you review an episode that didn't take place. They have to take that shuttle because this is such a complex, dense system of space. It's like the briar patch of space. They need this pilot to take them to the place they need to go, and he's the only one who can do it. But then it crashes and they get lost, but the Enterprise isn't able to navigate through this section of space, and that's what stops them from getting there. There, fixed your episode for you.
And everything would feel so much more linked up.
From an audience perspective, this is only happening because we need them not to be there to rescue Picard and Wesley. And, you've got Dr. Crusher on the ship looking worried every 5 minutes.
But it's so irrelevant to what's happening. It is, as you're saying, it's so arbitrary. It could be anything. It's literally, tell them that we will be sending out a search party, but only once we've dealt with the thing we're already dealing with. They could be playing an extended game of Monopoly for all the relevance that it actually has to what's happening.
You know what they could have done? They could have separated the saucer section and sent half of the crew to find Picard and Wesley and use the other section of the ship to tow the garbage pod.
That's ridiculous. You've got all these sort of, we need to work out a way of towing faster, and we need to work out a way of making the tractor beam work better, or upping the shields, or whatever, and it's just like you're just going to press some buttons. There's nothing being done. Just like the problem solving on the planet is boring and arbitrary, the problem solving on the ship is also boring and arbitrary, and it's like our shearing speed is now this, and you're just like, okay, fine, well done. Geordi pushed some buttons that I don't understand, and it just doesn't mean anything. It's just empty. It's just things happening, and they'd have been better not asking that question. Just the Enterprise is off on a mission. They've not received a distress call. They don't know they've not arrived. That journey could have taken ages. So they don't even need to have them getting delayed, because they didn't need to ask that question in the first place. They could have just, after a certain amount of time, realised the ship hadn't arrived. It's a lot of kind of filler in the episode to get to a point which I think is dramatically satisfying, but the episode as a whole just does not hang together in any way.
Yeah, it's just... I can't even get worked up about it, to be perfectly honest with you. Maybe I would do if I cared more about the A-plot, but it's there. It fulfills the function. But once it gets to the cave, I do genuinely just lose some enthusiasm.
A lot of this episode just feels like a reaction to Skin of Evil. They don't want to go down that path they went down with Tasha Yar and giving, killing off a character with a tar beast for some reason. They want it to be a meaningful exit, and I think obviously it's a very contrived issue that he has to overcome, but it's all done in the perfect way for Wesley. He is the smart ass. He always fixes it with science that we don't understand. It's been that way since the episode where they all got drunk. It works for me. It's exactly what I expected.
When you do reach that crescendo, and obviously when we're talking about stuff on a podcast, like we break stuff down and we are quite negative, but when you get to that moment, I envy you, Wesley Crusher. I was genuinely brought to tears by that. I just thought that is beautiful. It's beautifully just a beautiful bit of acting, and more of that. Just more either nothing, more dullness, them sitting on a shuttle eating sandwiches, or more of the absolute overwrought melodrama, and nothing in between.
Oh, I envy you, Wesley Crusher, because you're not crushed under several tons of rocks. I'm internally bleeding.
There's no more Wesley Crusher to envy. We salute you, Will Wheaton. Thanks for the memories. Oh, what's that? You're going to be back. Oh, all right then. Well,
see you in the movies.
Well, we'll see you next season. We spoke about the garbage pod model, but I think that the whole episode, it felt like a jump up in how cinematic it looked. And I know you get modern critics who are saying, oh, television has never looked better. It's so cinematic, and I feel it's very harsh on so many brilliant TV shows going all the way back to when television started. But this was an episode of Next Generation where, when they landed on the desert planet, I went, wow, this looks so much bigger and more immersive than anything they've done up to this point on Next Generation. It didn't look like a green screen or any sort of visual effects. It looked like they were really in this desert.
I can't disagree. And actually, beyond just the garbage ship effects, all the model shots looked great. Like, the Enterprise looked brilliant. I thought the shuttle looked amazing when it was crashing. Just the spins. It did feel like an expensive episode, which is weird because it's sort of a small episode, and I don't disagree with any of that. We said that last week. The Future Imperfect planet looked really great, and this planet looks really good. I mean, they've definitely been, I would say, more ambitious with what they achieve on their budget than Discovery ever has been, which never seems to go to any planets ever.
We are now doing the motion picture thing, though, of saying, ignore the plot, isn't it a lovely model?
But it is a lovely model.
Let's stare at that model for 10 minutes.
I'll quite happily do that.
That's Thursday.
I think it's all about what makes Star Trek great. Everything comes together and works so well. So there's one element that you can look at. You can say the model work is great, and you can enjoy it on that level, and you can enjoy the emotion of it. And sometimes the special effects don't work quite so well, but you've got the writing there instead. And sometimes everything goes wrong, and it's season 1 of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
That's a good point. We all took something away from the episode at the very least.
I liked it a lot more than you guys, evidently.
I like it more than I'm making out, but that just makes for great drama.
I didn't. I feel my level of enthusiasm has been adequately conveyed.
I thought going into this, we've watched 2 really great episodes. Oh, we're going to be so happy talking about these episodes. We're not going to have anything bad to say. Anyway,
let's go see if we've got anything to say in Quickfire.
Quickfire.
Here's an extract from an interview with Will Wheaton, which I'm going to read because we don't use audio of other things because that would be foolish. Here's the absolute truth why I left Star Trek. I left Star Trek because it was seriously interfering with my career in feature films. Come on, you guys. I mean, harsh. I was in a situation where I was constantly having to pass on really good movie roles because I was on the series. I had a film career before Star Trek. People knew me before Star Trek. As a matter of fact, at Comic-Con, a lot of people came up to me and said, I started watching Star Trek because you were on it. And I was a fan of yours from Stand By Me, and I stopped watching it after you left. I had a lot of people say that to me. After something like this had happened a lot of times, this was finally the last straw. I'd been cast by Milos Forman to be in Valmont. I'd gone through lots and lots of callbacks. I'd met Milos personally a number of times, and he was really supporting me and telling me, I want you in my movie. I was going to Paris, and I was going to be in this movie and stuff, and what happened was we were going to shoot during the hiatus, and the shooting schedule for Valmont would have carried me over into about a week of the regular schedule of Star Trek. I would have to sit out the first episode of the year right. That's not a big deal. It's not like I'm the captain. At that point, I was the guy who pushed buttons and said, yes, sir. So I said to the people in Star Trek, I need to be written out of this particular episode because I'm going to do this movie and my film career is going to take off. This is after Gene Roddenberry had died. Had Gene been alive, it would have been no problem at all because Gene was that kind of guy. Gene would have said, great, go ahead. You do what you need to do. Because he was that kind of person. After Gene died, a very different type of person took over, and they said, we can't write you out because the first episode of the season is all about you. It focuses entirely on your character, and it's your story. So he said to me, the story is entirely about you. We can't write you out. I said, well, this really sucks, but I'm under contract to you guys, and if that's your call and that's what you say I have to do. I had to pass in the movie. A couple of days before the season was ready to premiere, they wrote me out of the episode entirely. What they were doing was sending me a message. The message was, we own you. Don't ever try and do anything without us. That was the last straw for me. I called my agents and said, they don't own me. It's time for me to leave this show. It's time for me to be gone. That's what really pushed me over the edge. It's not worth it anymore. That's why I left.
Yeah, that is complete bollocks because Gene Roddenberry didn't die for another year. He was still alive. He had input into this episode.
Maybe he wasn't well.
Can I just say, what a cavalcade of characters presented there. It was genuinely like Gene Roddenberry and the new producers were in a room.
I can't believe that Will Wheaton killed Gene Roddenberry.
Just to get out of Star Trek.
I can't believe how similar Gene sounds to Maurice Hurley. Who knew?
Well, you hire people who are similar to yourself. I miss Maurice Hurley.
We all do.
Opening up the Nitpicker's Guide to see what Pernickety Picks Phil has for this edition of the show, he says, when Picard, Wesley and Durgo leave the crashed shuttle, Picard fashions an arrow from some scrap metal and places it on the ground. He says that the arrow will let rescuers know that they've headed for the mountains. When they start walking away from the craft, however, they aren't quite lined up with the arrow. In fact, they're a good distance off. Well, I mean, actually he's right.
Rick Berman said, "That's one of my favourite episodes. I think it was very poignant, and the acting on the part of the guest cast, Nick Tate, Patrick Swayze and Wills, was just excellent. I thought it was a terrific piece of drama." It's interesting from Rick Berman there.
So, Memory Alpha lists all the future appearances of Wesley Crusher. And I'm very interested by their last entry, which is as well as Star Trek Nemesis. They're counting that. He's in about 2 frames in the background.
Those green perspex symbols have more screen time than he does.
I mean, I would actually say, though, it benefits the character, because when he comes back, most of the time, the episode gets to be about him, and he actually gets to do something, which is, like a lot of the guest stars when they appear, like Ensign Rowe or Barclay, and they actually get more to do than the series regulars. So in The Game, or The First Duty, or Journey's End, these are Wesley episodes, and that's actually about as much as he would have got had he stayed on the show anyway, only he would have got paid more and got to press the buttons.
Yeah, he definitely made the right choice leaving.
Oh, he has said since that he regretted it. Not that he wishes he could sit and chat to himself and still be part of this very important thing. But, he's done okay. Actually, he's had more acting roles, albeit a lot of them as himself, than a lot of the TNG cast. 2 days of location shooting were done on the El Mirage dry lake bed in San Bernardino, California, east of Los Angeles, to portray the surface of Lambda Paz.
You can tell it's location shooting because the minute they're there, they're instantly talking about how quickly they can get away from it.
It's not a horse, though, is there?
No.
Disappointing.
And that's where it falls down. I mean, the location, not the horse. It's not like the Grand National.
This is from Memory Beta on Wesley Crusher. According to some of the Star Trek novels, in Wesley's time aboard the Enterprise, Wesley gained the nickname Brain Trust, a name he was not particularly fond of.
And no one ever used. Wesley, as well as coming back for episodes of Star Trek Next Generation, appeared in the non-canonical Star Trek The Tour, alongside actor Tim Russ as Tuvok. It showcased a multimedia presentation, putting the visitors in the middle of a simulated Starfleet adventure. Aboard the USS Titan, although surprisingly, Captain Riker was not available for that. It's curious, isn't it? Apparently Wesley had rejoined Starfleet.
Rejoined, but at this point he hasn't left.
Spoilers. Well, that's another one wrapped up. Thank you for joining us for that very sad and emotional farewell. Next time, we'll be talking about the loss, which makes you appreciate just how good this week's episode was. Until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.